All right, guys, we are on the home stretch. We got about 5 to 8 minutes left, so bear with me because this is where everything gets tied together. It's the most important part, okay? So we're going to focus for a second on the difference between explicit or conscious versus the automatic or unconscious or subconscious, right? So the explicit things are the things that we are aware of and actually think through when we make the decision. Automatic, subconscious, and unconscious are things that they're reactions. The brain is going to do them automatically. Okay, so a heartbeat represents something that is automatic and almost all the time is unconscious. We're not even thinking about the heartbeat, but it continues to beat. And all the way to the most explicit would be something like planning a trip where it's in the future. So in order to plan for it, we have to make decisions ahead of time, and that is explicit, right? So the reptilian brain represents our automatic unconscious processes, right? Sometimes we can be aware of it, like we can be aware of our heartbeat, we can be aware of our breathing, we can adjust our breathing, but we are going to breathe. Okay, so that is the reptilian brain. That is an automatic, almost all of the time, unconscious process. Okay, the mammalian brain, the limbic brain, has a little bit bigger of a spectrum, right? So some of the things that the mammalian brain does is unconscious and automatic. It happens and we are not aware of it. Some of the stuff that the mammalian brain or limbic brain does is automatic but subconscious. We're partly aware of it, like our emotions and our reactions and our emotional reactions, right? And then our prefrontal cortex is over here and represents our explicit decision making, where we think through things, we rationalize, we reason, all of that. Now you may notice there's an overlap, and that's because the mammalian brain interacts and affects the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex can interact with and influence the mammalian brain, right? So we talk about reactions. The mammalian brain will have these reactions. If you become aware of your reactions and what triggers those reactions, you can train the mammalian brain to react differently. But if you're not aware of it, then the mammalian brain will continue to react how it always has to those circumstances. Okay, so to make this all a little bit more clear and something that we can use for the rest of our lives, and it will be something that you use for the rest of your lives, is an analogy: the rider and the elephant. So this analogy was made famous by a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Happiness Hypothesis. He also talked about it in his book, The Righteous Mind. Okay, so something that you need to know first off about this analogy: your brain is both the rider and the elephant. The rider and the elephant represents how your brain works and how the different systems work with each other or against each other. Okay, so here's an elephant, right? So the elephant represents your reptilian and your mammalian brain, your limbic system and your reptilian brain, the automatic processes that we were just talking about, right? And some of those are conscious, that we have no awareness of them. Some of them are subconscious, and we have some partial awareness of them. Okay, so the elephant reacts to the environment and makes decisions automatically, doesn't think through them. They're instant reactions, right? Because to survive, to get to this point, we have had to make quick decisions, right? We can't take the time to stop and think through everything. So the elephant represents those reactions that we need, okay? So the elephant filters everything through the lens of threat versus reward. Is this going to help me, or is this going to be bad for me? Will I like it, or will I not like it? Will it be fun, or will it be scary? That's what the elephant filters through, and it makes its decisions automatically, right? So in a time where you're living in the wild and there's predators, that is a great thing, because if you see a threat, boom, you're reacting and you do what you need to survive. However, now that we live in societies, it's not always the best thing, right? So if the elephant likes something or sees something as a reward, it's going to move towards it. If it thinks it's a threat or doesn't like it or it won't be good, it's going to move away. Okay? Now, the elephant does all of this constantly and without thought. It processes what's happening, but it doesn't think. It reacts to things. Okay? Now, the rider represents our prefrontal cortex. Remember, we are the rider and the elephant. Our brain is both. So the rider's purpose evolved to serve the elephant, right? So the elephant made it all the way without the rider, but at some point the rider came along to help the elephant. So the rider represents our prefrontal cortex. The rider has language, it has the ability to speak, to communicate with other riders, to communicate with other elephants, to communicate with its own elephant. And the rider can plan for the future. It can make interpretations about the internal world. So an elephant might react to something and think it's bad, or experience something and think it's bad. The rider has the ability to process what happened and decide after the fact if it was actually bad or not, right? And so if the elephant constantly reacts to something that's not bad as something that is bad, that's not a great thing. And the rider's job should be to step in and help train the elephant so that the elephant doesn't react that way. Okay? So you are both, the rider and the elephant. Your brain is both. We have a rider and an elephant. They're getting along. What we want to do is take a little bit of time, and I'm going to ask questions, give you a second to think, and then throw some ideas out. But the elephant and the rider is a new concept to you, so we don't have those neurological connections. But we want to remember it because, like I said, this is an important analogy for understanding how your brain works and how you make decisions. Okay, so what we want to do to remember it better is we want to take the rider and the elephant, which is brand new. We don't have a whole lot of connections. We want to tie it to existing connections, right? So we want to relate it to things that we do know already, to connections that are already there. So who do you think has more control, the rider or the elephant? Now, you might think that the rider has more control because the rider is smarter, right? The rider can look ahead and into the past, and it's not so much just reacting to what's happening. It can interpret what has happened, what happened as a result of that, and it can interpret and plan moves to make the future better. But the elephant is much, much, much bigger and stronger and actually has the ability to override the rider almost all of the time. Can the rider force the elephant to act? Now, this is kind of interesting. Psychology has found that we have limited willpower. So willpower is essentially, urging yourself or making yourself not do something that you want to. And we can do this sometimes, but we have a limited amount of it. And once we've used all our willpower for a day, then that willpower resource gets exhausted, and the elephant takes over and says, all right, it's my show now. So yes, you can force the elephant to act, but not a lot. Okay, do you think it's easy to change the elephant's tendencies? So if the elephant reacts to something constantly, yeah, it can be tough, but you can do it, right? So think about training any animal. You can train an elephant, you can train a dog, but it takes practice and repetition because we want to change the reactions of the elephant. Okay, who can make better decisions for both of their futures? The rider, because the rider thinks about the future. The elephant reacts to what is in front of it. Is it important for the rider and elephant to get along? Absolutely.